The roar of engines, the rhythmic clatter of tracks, the concussive boom of a main gun, and the piercing shriek of incoming shells. These were the omnipresent sounds of armored warfare in World War II, a symphony of destruction that reshaped landscapes and defined an era. Within this deafening cacophony, a legendary rivalry was forged, one that continues to captivate historians, enthusiasts, and military strategists. The American M4 Sherman versus the German Peugeot WWII Tiger. For decades, this comparison has dominated military discussions, often painted in broad dramatic strokes, as a straightforward narrative of a technologically advanced, fearsome German beast pitted against a humble, mass-produced Allied workhorse. But to truly understand the dynamics of this confrontation, and indeed the broader story of Allied victory, we must delve far deeper. The true story is far more nuanced, a stark lesson not just in tank design and individual combat prowess, but in the brutal, all-encompassing realities of industrial warfare, where logistics, production lines, strategic bombing, manpower, and the sheer overwhelming force of numbers could prove more decisively than the mightiest cannon or the thickest armor. Let's set the stage. By 1942, as the Second World War raged across continents from the desolate North African deserts to the frozen plains of the Eastern Front, both the Allies and the Axis powers were pushing the boundaries of armored technology with unprecedented urgency. Germany, having shocked the world with its revolutionary blitzkrieg tactics in the early war years, spearheaded by its Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks, found itself confronted by new, formidable adversaries. The Soviet Union had introduced the T-34, a revolutionary design boasting sloped armor and a potent 76.2-meter gun, which caught the Wehrmacht completely off guard during Operation Barbarossa. Its combination of mobility, protection, and firepower forced German designers back to the drawing board, pushing them to develop something superior, something that could regain qualitative superiority on the battlefield. Meanwhile, the Western Allies, particularly the United States and Great Britain, were also refining their designs, aiming not necessarily for the ultimate super tank, but for a delicate balance of firepower, protection, and crucially, mobility and ease of production. The war was evolving rapidly and the stakes were higher than ever. When the Tiger, I first rumbled onto the battlefield in late 1942, specifically at Leningrad and then in Tunisia, it was a profound and terrifying shock to Allied forces. This wasn't just another tank. It was a statement of German engineering prowess, a terrifying evolution of armored warfare that instantly reset expectations for what a battle tank could be. Weighing in at a colossal 54 tons, 59.5 short tons for the initial production models, and even heavier for later variants, the Tiger was a true behemoth compared to anything the Allies possessed in significant numbers or, frankly, had even conceived. Its massive, boxy silhouette was instantly imposing, its presence on the battlefield often enough to sow panic and force immediate tactical reassessments from opposing commanders. The psychological impact of the Tiger was immense. Simply knowing a Tiger was in the vicinity could paralyze an advance or instill dread in tank crews. At the very heart of the Tiger's fearsome reputation was its main armament, the formidable KWK-36 L56 88mm cannon. This gun was not merely powerful, it was a weapon of legend, a direct descendant of the renowned Flak 18 anti-aircraft gun that had already proven devastatingly effective in an anti-tank role in Spain and France. Repurposed, refined, and perfected for tank combat, the KWK-36 was devastatingly accurate and possessed immense penetrating power. It could punch through the front armor of virtually any Allied tank at truly considerable ranges, often over 1,500 meters, sometimes even exceeding 2,000 meters under ideal conditions. For an American M4 Sherman crew or a British Churchill or Cromwell crew, seeing a Tiger meant entering a world of extreme, almost existential danger, knowing with chilling certainty that the German tank could engage and destroy them long before they could hope to retaliate effectively. This range disparity created a tactical nightmare for the Allies, forcing them to close distances under lethal fire. Protection-wise, the Tiger the Barnhor was an unparalleled fortress on tracks. Its frontal hull armor was a staggering 100 mm thick, 3.9 inches, applied vertically. While later designs like the Panther would adopt sloped armor for increased effective thickness, the sheer mass of the Tiger's vertical plate was, at the time, virtually impenetrable to most Allied anti-tank weapons at combat ranges. Even with specialized high-velocity anti-tank guns, Allied tankers struggled immensely to penetrate the Tiger's frontal glacis. Hits that would cripple or destroy other tanks would often simply bounce off the Tiger, leaving its crew shaken but intact, able to continue the fight. Side and rear armor were thinner, at 80 mm, 3.1 inches, but still substantial enough to withstand many common anti-tank threats. This meant a Tiger often had to be outmaneuvered, flanked, or engaged by multiple tanks simultaneously to stand a chance of penetration, tactics that required immense skill, coordination, and often significant losses. The Tiger's turret front was also 100 mm thick, with the gun mantelet being even thicker at 120 mm. Mobility, for such a heavy tank, was surprisingly decent, although always constrained by its immense weight. Powered by a robust Maybach HL 230 P45 V12 gasoline engine producing 690 horsepower, the Tiger could reach speeds of up to 45 km/h, 28 in miles on roads. Its off-road performance, however, was significantly slower, usually around 20-25 km/h, 12-15 unbeschert, and heavily dependent on terrain. The tank featured an innovative, although incredibly complex, Schachtellaufwerk, overlapping an interleaved road wheel system. While this system distributed the tank's weight efficiently and provided a remarkably smooth ride, it came with significant drawbacks. Its fuel consumption was astronomical, roughly 7.8 liters per kilometer, or 1.3 miles per gallon, on roads and far worse off-road. Its mechanical components, particularly the transmission and final drives, were notoriously prone to breakdowns under the immense stresses of its weight. Furthermore, its sheer size and weight made it an absolute nightmare to recover when bogged down, damaged, or immobilized. A disabled Tiger often had to be abandoned or even deliberately destroyed by its own crew if recovery was impossible or threatened capture by the enemy. This led to many Tigers being lost not to enemy fire, but to mechanical failure and subsequent scuttling. The Tiger, in essence, was designed for the tank duel, a concept deeply ingrained in German armored doctrine of qualitative superiority. It was built to dominate, to destroy opposing armor from a distance with its powerful 88 mm gun, and to withstand return fire with its heavy armor. It was the embodiment of the German philosophy of qualitative superiority, a belief that a smaller number of highly advanced, powerful machines, expertly crewed, could overcome a larger, less sophisticated foe through superior technology and tactics. And in a one-on-one confrontation on an open field, a Tiger almost invariably held the decisive upper hand, a terrifying advantage that was often leveraged with devastating effect by its highly trained crews. Tiger battalions were often held as strategic reserves, deployed to critical sectors to blunt Allied offensives or spearhead German counterattacks. Across the lines, the Allies, particularly the United States, approached tank design with a distinctly different philosophy, one epitomized by the M4 Sherman medium tank. Introduced into service in 1942, the Sherman was conceived not as a super tank designed to outduel enemy heavy armor, but as a reliable, adaptable, and critically mass-producible medium tank. Its design reflected American industrial might, a pragmatic understanding of the demands of total war, and the Allied doctrine of combined arms. The initial Sherman models, armed with a 75mm M3 gun, were perfectly adequate against most German tanks encountered in 1942-43, such as the Panzer III and earlier variants of the Panzer IV. This gun, while not a high-velocity anti-tank specialist, had excellent high-explosive HE capabilities, making it highly effective against infantry, fortifications, and unarmored targets, a versatility highly valued by Allied commanders who often saw tanks in an infantry support role. However, it quickly became painfully apparent, particularly after encounters in North Africa and later in Italy and Normandy, that the 75mm M3 was woefully inadequate against the heavy frontal armor of the Tiger and later German designs like the Panther. Its shells simply lacked the muzzle velocity and penetrating power to consistently defeat the Tiger's frontal armor at anything but point-blank ranges, if at all. Protection on the early Sherman models was also a significant concern, especially when facing the Tiger's 88mm. Its armor ranged from around 50mm 2 inches on the front hull, often sloped at a reasonable angle, which improved its effective thickness, but was still considerably less than the Tiger's, to 38mm, 1.5 inches on the sides and rear. While sufficient for its intended role against lesser threats and able to deflect many anti-tank rifle rounds or smaller caliber shells, this made the Sherman highly vulnerable to the Tiger's 80mm gun. A single well-placed shot from a Tiger could, and often did, inflict catastrophic damage to a Sherman, frequently leading to ammunition explosions and the infamous tank brewing up, a grim nickname that underscored its vulnerability and tendency to catch fire due to ammunition storage and fuel tank placement. Early models stored ammunition in racks high up in the turret and sponsons, making them susceptible to catastrophic secondary explosions. This issue was later addressed with wet storage racks, where ammunition was stored in water jackets, significantly reducing the brew-up rate. Mobility was a strong suit for the Sherman, lighter at around 30-32 tons, 33-35 short tons, and powered by various engines, most commonly a Continental R975C1 radial aircraft engine for early models, or later the excellent Ford GAA V8 gasoline engine, and even diesel engines like the GM 6246 twin diesel for some variants. The Sherman was faster, more agile, and generally had a better operational range than the Tiger. Its simpler vertical volet spring suspension system and lighter weight meant it was far less prone to mechanical breakdowns than its German counterpart, and significantly easier to recover and repair in the field. These engines, while perhaps not as powerful per kilogram as the Maybach, were utterly reliable and easily maintained. But the true genius of the Sherman lay not in its individual combat prowess, but in its producibility and adaptability. The U.S. industrial base, largely untouched by bombing and operating at an incredible pace, churned out Shermans at an astonishing rate. By the end of the war, over 49,000 units of all variants had been produced, a number that dwarfed the combined production of all German heavy and medium tanks, Panzer III, Afui, Panther, Tiger I, Tiger II, by a staggering margin. This sheer volume was a strategic asset in itself. Its modular design allowed for rapid modifications and upgrades throughout its service life, demonstrating an unparalleled flexibility. When the 75 mm gun proved insufficient against heavier German armor, it was replaced by the more powerful M1 and M111 guns, which had higher muzzle velocity and improved armor-piercing capabilities. The British, facing the same challenges and possessing a potent anti-tank weapon, famously upgunned some Shermans with their magnificent 17-pounder anti-tank gun, creating the Firefly, a tank that, for the first time, could finally go toe-to-toe with the Tiger and Panther, penetrating their frontal armor at considerable ranges. The Firefly became an invaluable asset, often deployed one per troop of 3 standard Shermans. Later American variants, like the M4A3E8 EZ8, featured improved frontal armor, often thickened to 63 mm or more or with applique armor, wider tracks, utilizing the horizontal volute spring suspension or HVSS for better mobility on soft ground and reduced ground pressure, and the excellent 76 mm M1A2 gun, significantly closing the gap in combat effectiveness and survivability against its German adversaries. The Sherman also excelled in its internal design and ergonomics. Its standard 5-man crew, commander, gunner, loader, driver, assistant driver, bow gunner, was efficient and well-trained. The spacious turret allowed for easier handling of ammunition, better crew comfort, and more efficient operation during combat. Crucially, the Sherman's robust reliability and relative simplicity meant more tanks were available for combat at any given time, rather than sitting in workshops awaiting complex repairs. Spare parts were abundant, standardized, and interchangeable, simplifying maintenance and repairs on the front lines to an extent unimaginable for German heavy tanks. A damaged Sherman could often be repaired and returned to service within hours or days, while a Tiger might be a total loss or require weeks of specialized attention, often far from the front. So, if the Tiger was so qualitatively superior in a head-to-head fight, how did the Allies ultimately win the tank war? The answer lies in moving far beyond the simplistic, romanticized tank duel narrative and understanding the broader complex context of tank warfare, a concept encompassing everything from strategic planning and industrial output to individual crew training and battlefield tactics. Sheer numbers. The unstoppable tide. This is perhaps the single most critical factor. For every Tiger, which saw a total production of just 347 units for the Tiger the Warren and 492 for the Tiger II King Tiger, there were dozens, sometimes hundreds, of Shermans. The approximate total production of the M4 Sherman family was nearly 5,000 units. This meant that while a single Tiger could indeed devastate an attacking force, it simply couldn't be everywhere at once. Allied commanders operating under a grim but necessary calculus of industrial warfare could afford to trade losses. They understood that to destroy one Tiger, they might lose 2 or 3 Shermans. This wasn't a callous disregard for lives, but a pragmatic acknowledgement that tanks could be replaced, but experienced men, especially tank crews, were irreplaceable. However, the abundance of tanks also meant that even if a crew lost their tank, they often lived to fight another day, quickly being re-equipped with a new one. This sustained combat effectiveness and morale, preventing the kind of crippling personnel losses that plagued German units. The sheer weight of numbers allowed the Allies to sustain relentless pressure, absorb attrition, and always maintain a numerical superiority at the point of attack, regardless of individual tank quality. Logistics and supply. The arteries of war. War is, at its heart, a logistical nightmare, and the Allies, particularly the Americans, mastered it on an unprecedented scale. Their incredible industrial output wasn't just about building tanks, but also about building the ships to transport them across oceans, the trains and trucks to get them to the front lines, along with the colossal quantities of fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and personnel needed to sustain them. The Red Ball Express, for instance, was a testament to Allied logistical prowess, moving millions of tons of supplies across France after D-Day. German logistics, especially later in the war, were a constant debilitating struggle. They suffered from chronic fuel shortages, exacerbated by Allied strategic bombing of oil production facilities, railway infrastructure damage due and disruption, and a fundamental inability to quickly replace damaged or destroyed heavy equipment, let alone sustain their operational needs. A Tiger immobilized due to lack of fuel or a minor mechanical issue was just as useless as one destroyed by enemy fire, and often such immobilized tanks were eventually abandoned and scuttled. Reliability and maintainability, the hidden strength. The Sherman's relative simplicity was its hidden yet ultimately decisive strength. It was designed to be easily maintained and repaired in the field, often by relatively inexperienced crews with standard toolkits. A broken track, a damaged engine, a faulty transmission, these could often be fixed quickly, often within hours. The Tiger, with its complex drivetrain, delicate Maybach engine, intricate overlapping road wheels, which often clogged with mud and ice in winter, and heavy components, was a nightmare to repair. Even something as seemingly minor as changing a single inner road wheel could take hours of arduous work, sometimes requiring specialized heavy recovery equipment to lift the tank. This meant that a far higher percentage of Allied tanks were operational and ready for combat at any given time compared to their German counterparts, whose operational readiness rates for heavy tanks often hovered around 30 to 50%. Combined arms tactics, more than just tanks. The Allies rarely expected tanks to fight alone in an isolated duel. The Sherman was an integral part of a sophisticated combined arms approach, working in conjunction with infantry, artillery, and critically overwhelming air support. Allied air superiority became almost total by 1944. Ground attack aircraft like the P-47 Thunderbolts, jugged to its pilots, and Hawker Typhoons armed with rockets and bombs were devastating tank killers, often hunting down Tigers and Panthers from above, where their top armor was thinnest, typically 25-40 meter on a Tiger, vulnerable to even smaller bombs and rockets. Artillery barrages could suppress German positions, allowing Shermans to close the distance or force Tigers to relocate, potentially into ambushes. Infantry, armed with bazookas and later more effective anti-tank weapons like the M9 bazooka or the British Piat, could also provide vital close-range support, protecting tanks from German Panzerfaust ambushes and enabling close-quarters engagements where the Tiger's long-range advantage was negated. The coordination between these elements was a well-oiled machine, often overwhelming German defenses through sheer synchronized force. Tactical adaptability and crew training. Allied crews, while initially shocked and often demoralized by their first encounters with the Tiger, quickly adapted. They learned to avoid frontal engagements, to use terrain to their advantage, such as hull-down positions, and to concentrate fire on the Tiger's weaker side and rear armor. The famous tactic of multiple Shermans swarming a single Tiger, one drawing frontal fire and acting as a decoy, while others maneuvered rapidly for flank shots, became a common, albeit dangerous and costly strategy. This wolf pack approach, while leading to losses, was often effective. Furthermore, the sheer volume of tanks produced meant that more crews were trained, gained combat experience, and fed a continuous stream of battle-hardened tankers to the front. While German Tiger crews were often highly experienced, meticulously trained, and part of elite heavy tank battalions, their numbers were finite. As the war progressed, the quality of German training and replacement crews declined, while Allied training continued to improve and adapt based on battlefield lessons. Upgrades and innovation, the evolving Sherman. The Sherman platform allowed for constant evolution and iterative improvements throughout the war. The introduction of the 76mm gun significantly improved its anti-tank capabilities. The British Firefly, though a modification outside the U.S., was a crucial development that gave Allied forces a tank truly capable of penetrating the Tiger's front armor at range, forcing German tank commanders to rethink their tactics. Later, American Sherman variants also received improved armor, e.g., M4A3 with thickened front plates, better suspensions, and more powerful engines, incrementally increasing their survivability and combat effectiveness. The Germans, while also innovating with tanks like the Panther and King Tiger, were limited by their production capacity, their dwindling resources, and the increasing strategic bombing of their factories. This made widespread deployment of their cutting-edge designs difficult and often too late to alter the strategic balance. Their wonder weapons remained relatively rare and plagued by mechanical issues. Behind every Sherman and every Tiger were human beings, often terrified, often incredibly courageous. For a Sherman crew, knowing their tank was often outmatched in a straight fight, especially against a Tiger, took immense bravery. They often faced the grim reality of needing multiple precise hits, sometimes at close range, to disable a Tiger, while a single well-aimed shot from the German giant could inflict catastrophic damage, frequently ending their fight and their lives. The psychological impact of facing a Tiger was immense, earning it a fearsome reputation that sometimes exceeded its actual statistical impact. Stories abound of Sherman crews deliberately engaging Tigers, knowing the odds were stacked against them, but doing so out of duty, to protect advancing infantry, to hold a vital position, or to enable a breakthrough for their comrades. Their tenacity, resourcefulness, and willingness to press the attack were crucial to overcoming the qualitative gap. Similarly, the crews of Tiger tanks were often highly skilled, dedicated, and courageous, part of elite heavy tank battalions, Schwer Panzerabteilungen. They knew their machines were formidable and often fought with incredible tenacity, extracting a heavy toll from the Allied forces. These crews were often veterans who had seen extensive combat. However, they also faced their own unique challenges. The constant fear of being outflanked by numerically superior enemy tanks, the relentless logistical nightmares of keeping their behemoths supplied with fuel and parts, the loneliness of being a heavily armored but numerically inferior force, and the growing existential threat from the air against which even a Tiger had little defense. The mental strain of being constantly hunted was immense. The enduring narrative of Sherman versus Tiger is more than just a comparison of steel, firepower, and armor. It's a microcosm of the entire Allied victory in World War II. The Tiger represented a philosophy of war that, while producing terrifyingly effective individual weapon systems and embodying engineering excellence, ultimately failed to grasp the sheer scale, resource demands, and sustained pressure of modern total warfare. Its complexity, immense resource intensity, and critically, its low production numbers made it strategically unsustainable in the long run against an enemy with vastly superior industrial capacity. Germany simply could not build enough Tigers, nor could it keep the ones it did build operational and supplied. The Sherman, on the other hand, embodied the Allied, particularly American approach, pragmatic, adaptable, and overwhelming in its industrial capacity. It wasn't designed to be the best tank in a one-on-one duel, but it was arguably the best tank for the war the Allies fought. Its ease of production, logistical flexibility, inherent reliability, and sheer numbers allowed the Allies to absorb losses, maintain relentless momentum, and bring irresistible sustained force to bear against the German war machine. The ability to quickly replace losses, repair damaged vehicles, and continuously supply the front lines proved far more significant than the individual combat statistics of any single tank. In the end, the outcome of the tank war wasn't just about the quality of a single tank, but about the quality and resilience of an entire war-making apparatus. The Shermans' triumph over the Tiger, and by extension, the Allied victory in the tank war, was a testament to the power of mass production, superior logistics, innovative combined arms tactics, strategic bombing, and the relentless determination of millions of soldiers, sailors, and airmen operating in a coordinated, unified effort. The phrase, "quantity has a quality all its own," might seem counterintuitive in a world often obsessed with individual technological superiority. But in the context of the Sherman and the Tiger, it was the undeniable truth that shaped the outcome of the greatest and most devastating conflict in human history. The Sherman, humble yet ubiquitous, represents the triumph of practicality and industrial might over bespoke, high-tech individual excellence when deployed on a global scale.